While in Davos for the World Economic Forum, our Moon Conn-young got to sit down for a one-on-one with Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation senior fellow Kane, who was in the Swiss resort town to discuss the issue of fully autonomous weapons. The former UN disarmament chief shared her perspective on that topic, as well as dealing with North Korea, that perhaps we are too fixated on punishing the regime for its recent actions and, along the way, perhaps completely excluded the option of engaging in greater dialogue. Take a look.
So, Kane with the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jen.
So first of all, I'd like for you to just share with us your experience in Davos so far. I know you gave an impressive panelist talk at the What If Robots Go to War. So could you explain that?
It's an issue that really does not come up very much in the public consciousness. And I have tried, when I was in my function as High Representative for Disarmament Affairs at the United Nations until just last year, I've tried very hard to get member states' attention to this issue. And it was picked up, but it took a little bit of time. And what it basically means is that if you have a lethal autonomous weapon system or laws, it means that you're giving the power over life and death to a robot who is not programmed by a human, but is pre-programmed for certain actions. And then you have really very important issues about accountability, and also about unleashing a system that could be manipulated, it could malfunction. So there are a lot of problems, and you really need to regulate it. Last July, there was a very strong letter by the scientific community that was released, the artificial intelligence community, that was released arguing that measures needed to be taken very quickly before the window closed. And yesterday, one of the artificial intelligence scientists put that window at maximum 2 years, which I find very scary because the international community just doesn't work that fast. We do need usually a lot more time.
So you've been working on disarmament and non-proliferation of weapons for a very long time. North Korea must have been on your radar for a long time, since you've been involved in all kinds of positions of related to this area. What is your take on North Korea and its development of nuclear weapons?
Well, I think it's a very sad development that we have more states developing nuclear weapons. And North Korea was, of course, a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, but then left it and therefore started to develop its own nuclear technology. Unfortunately, the DPRK is the only country in this century that has tested nuclear weapons. And I must tell you that, of course, all of these tests are immediately detected. I mean, by all of the seismic stations, including from the CTBTO. And so one knows within minutes, basically, that a nuclear test was conducted. And it's not only the fallout from the nuclear tests that we are greatly concerned about, but it's also because it goes against any of the norms of international diplomacy, international relations. And we have to also juxtapose that with the recent agreement between Iran and the EU 3+3, which again is taking out a possible danger for the international community. I think that's very positive, and I wish that we would have another process that would also much closely engage the DPRK government in order to arrive at a solution for this issue.
Right, and which is why there have been various efforts by the global community to instead of isolating them, to make them more involved, to involve them in dialogues. And I know that you've been part of that as well, in trying to get them be involved and in a dialogue with the rest of the world.
Everyone always looks to China as being the patron, if you so want, and partner of the DPRK. And I think that is undoubtedly true, but I think it should not be only limited to that. There needs to be much broader international dialogue. I haven't really seen very much of that international dialogue in the United Nations, and I found it in a way not correct, that we don't bring North Korea in more closely to the international community. Yes, they are under sanctions. It's interesting to note that they are under more limited sanctions than, for example, Iran was. So that's a very interesting point to observe. And there's always a question like, what do you actually achieve with sanctions? I think sanctions set an important signal, and yes, they are important as a tool in international diplomacy, but I don't think that they've been very effective in many cases, including in the DPRK. And so the only solution that you really have is to engage them in a dialogue, to talk to them, and see how can you actually address this issue, because there are grievances, and it's all a matter of perception. Your narrative, I don't mean your personal narrative, but as a country, the DPRK's narrative would be different from the South Korean narrative or the Japanese narrative. Right. I think this is really important, and there is a gap in communication that I have seen grow wider rather than closer, simply because there used to be certain processes. They have broken down in many aspects, which has led to an increasing isolation of the country. That, to my mind, is not very helpful. Irrespective of what you think, unless you start a dialogue or unless you continue to engage, you will never know what it is you might achieve.
Angela Kane, thank you so much for this talk today, and I look forward to seeing you again in Seoul, maybe.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you.